the podcast nowhere near Hollywood. It's Afternoon Coffee with Mike and Tim.
Hey, that was good. What I was thinking was maybe welcome to the Afternoon Coffee Podcast with Mike and Tim.
Nice try, boys, but this is how it should sound. This is the Afternoon Coffee Podcast with Mike and Tim.
All right, thank you, Heather. Well, today we have a very special guest, something still like the last time, a little different than what we've been doing in the past. We have a guy, Steve Snyder. He's a California native, a husband, father, a retiree from the vision insurance industry, and since then he's become quite an expert on the air war and World War II. He has authored a book called Shot Down, a story that involved your dad in World War II. Tell us about the book, Steve.
Oh gosh, well, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. Booked about my dad and his B-17 crew. A B-17 had a 10-man crew. They were shot down over occupied Belgium, on February 8th of 1944. And the book goes into detail about what happened to each member of the crew. 5 of the crew made it back home, 5 of them did not. And also, it's about all the courageous Belgian people that risked their lives trying to help them.
Fantastic. World War II has always had a soft spot in my heart also because my dad was in World War II. He was a tail gunner, and I don't know what bomber it was because he passed away when I was 16. And of course, at 16, you don't really care about the old war stories, and you really half listened, and you didn't know what to ask. But I would love to talk to him now. But it would be so cool if he was. If he was on a B-17, but he was in the Northern Africa Italian theater. That much I remember. But very interesting. Now you what made you lean towards this book? Is you started going over stories from your dad, or what made you kind of go in this direction?
Well, that's a very good question. I was born in 47, right after the war. So I was always very interested in World War II. I used to play Army when I was a little kid and read a lot of books. And so I always had interest in it. And growing up, I knew the basics of my dad's World War II history. I knew he was a B-17 pilot. He was stationed in England with the 8th Air Force. His plane was named the Susan Ruth after my oldest sister, who was a one-year-old at the time that he went overseas. And he flew bombing missions over Europe, and he was shot down. He was missing in action for 7 months. He evaded capture and got back to England. But it wasn't until I retired in 2009 that I really had the time to delve into my dad's war history in more detail. My parents had kept a lot of material from the war years, and I just wanted to go through all that, kind of organize it and learn a little bit more. And at that time, I had no intention of writing. But there were 2 items that were really significant. One was a diary that my dad wrote while he was missing in action about his plane being shot down, and it's absolutely riveting. It's in the book. And then the other thing were all the letters that my dad had written to my mother while he was stationed in England before he was shot down. Saved all those, and just sitting down one day and reading those letters it was just absolutely fascinating. And I became fascinated with the story of my dad and his crew, and it became my passion. I started reading book after book about the air war over Europe. I went on the internet and spent countless hours doing research, downloading declassified military documents. I went on a quest to find relatives of all my dad's crew, to ask them what information they could give me, letters, newspaper clippings, pictures, whatever. And I also joined a number of World War II organizations and started going to reunions, listening to veterans tell their stories. And finally, 3 years into my research, I just came to the conclusion that the story of my dad and his crew was so unique and so compelling that it needed to be told and people needed to know about it. So I decided to write a book.
Wow.
And it's really changed my life.
I can hear it in your voice. Yeah, I can. What was Did you happen to learn anything that was kind of unique or surprising on your journey? Because this sounds like a big journey and sounds like you're still on it.
Oh, incredible. Well, quite a few things, actually. One thing I'll have to say is I probably would not have written a book if it wasn't for 2 Belgian gentlemen. Dr. Paul Delahaye and Jacques Vallée. They were young boys during World War II, and they were greatly affected by it. They saw firsthand atrocities committed by the Nazis against family and friends, and later in life, they became local historians and they interviewed Belgian people and members of the Belgian underground about events that took place involving my dad and his crew, and they documented their testimony and they gave me unbelievably detailed information that would have been lost forever without their dedicated research. So I owe
Wow.
them a huge debt. Dr. Delahaye passed away in 2013. Jacques still with us. He's a dear friend of mine. So that was amazing that I had that information from them. But the biggest discovery I made uh, well, all my dad knew and all the Air Force knew was that my dad's plane was attacked by two German Focke-Wulf fighters, and the Susan Ruth was shot down. During my research, one day my wife casually uh, said, "Well, why don't you try to find the German pilot that shot him down?" Which I thought was a ridiculous. She's naive. She has no
Hmm.
idea what she's talking about.
Yeah,
It'd be impossible to do that.
sure.
But like a good husband, I did what she told me to do. And lo and behold, I found Hans Berger. Uh, and Hans is the only person in this the shot down story that's still alive. All my dad's crew, my dad's gone, his crew's gone, all the Belgian helpers are gone, but uh, Hans Berger is still with us. He's 96 years old, lives in Munich, Germany. I've gone over and visited him a couple times, and I interviewed him for the book, and he gave me uh, wonderful information about what it was like to go up against the 8th Air Force during the war that's in the book, and we become good friends.
Isn't that
And
something? Boy, you
yeah,
would
it's
never guess
incredible.
that.
And actually, the gunners on my dad's plane shot down Hans Berger's plane at the same time. They shot each other down. He bailed out and made it through the war. So that was absolutely incredible that I was able to find him and become friends with him.
Yeah, what was his reaction when when he found out that you were the son of one of the people he shot down? What was when you first reached out to him, what was his reaction?
Well, he was pretty surprised to say the least. Um, but he was excited about hearing from me. And for the book, I just interviewed him over the phone and through email. It wasn't until after I wrote the book that I went to Germany a couple times to meet him in person. But I just bombarded him question after question. One time he goes, "Steve, you're asking me all these personal questions, and I really don't know you very well." But I built up his trust, and it's pretty incredible. He says, it's amazing that uh, when we got together, that we were sitting there, talking face to face, with the son of a pilot that he'd shot down, and then the gunners of my dad's plane shot him down. He said it was unfortunate they had to be shooting at each other, but that was war. They were both sides of the pilots were there to do a job
Sure.
for their country, defend their country, fight for their country, and try to stay alive.
Yeah, you got to do what they're telling you to do, and that's just part of it. It's really kind of cool that you can go in there with no hard feelings, and say, I'm the offspring of one of the people you shot down. I'd love to talk to you, and we can be friends. It just seems on the surface it would seem a little odd, but really when you dig down into it, it makes sense. I mean, because you're finding out a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I do a lot of speaking, make PowerPoint presentations, and I get asked that, well, don't you hate this guy that shot down your dad's plane?
Mm.
And maybe if my dad was killed, I'd feel differently. But the way I kind of look at it, I feel kind of a personal connection to Hans. At one moment in time, Hans' life and my dad's life crossed paths.
Hmm.
And World War II was the definitive moment of my dad's life, probably for any guy that fought in the war. I mean, there was nothing that was more significant in their lives. So Hans is part of my dad's story, part of his life, and so it has a lot of meaning for me.
Absolutely. Steve, Tim here. I've got a couple questions for you, and one of them is that we would love, Mike and I and our listeners would love to hear maybe some of the stories your dad brought back about the Boeing B-17. That was a massive airplane, a flying fortress, as they called it. And looking at some specs here, it had a range of 2,000 miles, right? And it was there were 12,000 of the air, over 12,000 built, almost 13,000. It went 287 miles per hour. It was just a wingspan of 104 feet. It was just a huge plane. Did your dad give you any insights on the airplane and any stories?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, as you mentioned, it was nicknamed the Flying Fortress, nicknamed by a reporter for Seattle newspaper when the Boeing company first rolled it out. This reporter looked at it and was, "Oh my word, it's a flying fortress," and that was because of all the machine guns that they had on the plane. And there were actually three different models of B-17s flown in a European theater. The definitive model, the last model made, the G model, had 13 caliber machine guns, so it could put out a tremendous amount of firepower, and also it could take a tremendous amount of battle damage and continue flying. Those combat crews loved the B-17 because it could just be shot to heck,
Hmm.
lose engines and still, get back to
Mm-hmm.
their base safely in England. As I mentioned, that they had a 10-man crew. There were four officers who were up in the front of the plane, the bombardier, the navigator, and the two pilots. My dad was the lead pilot, and then next to him, my dad, the lead pilot, the first pilot sat in the left seat, and the co-pilot sat in the right seat. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other six men were enlisted men, non-commissioned officers, who were mainly gunners to help protect the plane, because their mission was to drop the bombs on industrial and military targets in occupied Europe and Germany. The
Mm.
goal to try to cripple Nazi Germany's ability to wage war. And flying combat was a dangerous and brutal undertaking, especially during the earlier years in the air war, particularly 1947. At the beginning of the war, it was 8th Bomber Command's belief that these, heavily armed bombers flying in these tight formations with, hundreds of bombers could defend themselves against the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. But sadly, that was not the case. They could not defend themselves from the Luftwaffe. And
Hmm.
even when they started giving these B-17s and B-24 bombers uh, fighter escorts, the fighters at the time didn't have the fuel capacity to escort the bombers all the way into Germany and then escort them back. They could escort them across the English Channel into occupied Europe for a ways, into France or Holland, what have you, Belgium. But then they'd run low on fuel and have to turn around and head for their bases back to England. And well, the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, would just wait for them to head back, and then they'd swoop in on these bombers.
Mm.
There were 26,000 men that were killed in the 8th Air Force, which was more than the entire Marine Corps fighting in the Pacific.
Hmm.
The other
Wow.
28,000 men became prisoners of war after their bombers were knocked out of the sky, either by German fighters or anti-aircraft. Being a combat crewman in the 8th Air Force was the most dangerous duty assignment in the United States military during World War II.
Isn't that something? I never heard that before. That's
Unbelievable.
wow.
Well, this is certainly interesting. Yeah, that airplane had four engines. They called them what, a Cyclone 9. So when your dad got shot down, and there were 10 crew members, right? 10.
Right,
All right. So
correct.
when they got shot down, and five made it, five didn't. But what was the? I know the outcome. The plane went down, but where did it get hit? Did you ever know that, or 'cause there were four engines on this plane? It had to get hit at a vital spot for this to happen.
Yeah, actually, they came up. The two fighters, the other German fighter was piloted by Siegfried Merrick. He was also shot down. His plane crashed and he was killed. Both German fighters came up from underneath the plane, and two of the crewmen were killed in the plane when it was attacked by the German
Hmm.
fighter, the ball turret gunner and the radio operator. And the other eight crewmen were able to bail out. and then three of
My.
those crewmen were killed a couple months later.
Mm.
And something different happened to each guy, really. Some became prisoners of war. My dad evaded capture. There was another crewman that evaded capture. Well, their stories are all different and all varied. Uh, Actually, it was right over the French-Belgian border. In fact, the plane came down, and my dad came down in Belgium, and the other guys that were able to bail out all came down in France, right at the border.
Hmm.
Mm.
So they were around for 7 months. Did they find a civilian house to kind of hole up in for a little while until things kind of calmed down, or how did they survive those 7 months?
Oh, after my dad bailed out, he came down and his into some trees, and his parachute got hung up. He was dangling 20 feet off the ground, and he couldn't get down. Fortunately
Mm.
for him, a couple of young Belgian men, Henri Franken and Raymond Dervan, came to his rescue before the Germans could get to him. This happened early afternoon, and so they told him to stay put and to hide because they thought it was too dangerous for him to try to move him during daylight. So that night they came back and got him, and then took him to the Dravan farmhouse nearby. He only stayed there one night because, again, they thought it was too dangerous for him to stay there with these German patrols combing the area looking for him.
Mm.
But the second night, Belgian customs officer Paul Tilcan came on a tandem bicycle to take him to another location, a safer location, and they headed out on this tandem bicycle. My dad had some shrapnel wounds in one of his legs, so he could only pedal with his good leg. And they came to a hill, and they weren't able to pedal up the hill anymore. It was middle of the night, pitch black, dark, drizzling. And when they got to the top of the hill, they got there was a little cafe, a cabaret there, and the lights were on. Loud music was playing. People were laughing and talking. And all of a sudden, two German officers walk out with their arms around these young girls. One of them comes up to my dad and asks him for a light for a cigarette. Well, my dad's petrified. He can't speak German or French at that time, but Paul knew what they wanted and lit the guy's cigarette, and they let him go on their way. My dad said these Germans were too drunk and too interested in these young girls to pay any
Mm.
attention to these guys pushing a bike up the road.
Wow.
And after that, my dad was moved from place to place to place. He might spend one night at a house. He might spend 6 weeks at a house, all dependent on how brave the people were that lived there, how dangerous the underground thought it was for him to stay there. And the people who hid my dad, or any down German for that matter, were unbelievably brave people. They risked not only their lives, but the lives of their family and friends, because if the German secret police, the Gestapo, found out about it, they'd be arrested, tortured, and either shot or sent to concentration camps. And some of the Belgian people who helped my father and other members of his crew did meet that fate. So he really owed his life to them. They let him sleep in their bed. They slept on the floor. They gave him, a majority of the food. Everything was rationed by the Germans at that time. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, I was just going to say that. So Belgium and France were both occupied at that time. I'm just surprised that there's partying going on. For some reason, it just seems
Well,
illogical.
The Germans
Oh,
would party.
oh, I got you. I got you.
Mm.
So my dad was being hidden, and typically, when the underground in any occupied country came across down airmen, they tried to get him back to England through various escape routes, down into France, over the Pyrenees into Spain, and out through British-controlled Gibraltar on the Mediterranean.
Oh,
Something
okay.
always went wrong trying to get my dad out. Uh, the networks were compromised, or people were, killed, or one thing or another, which was very frustrating for my dad. And finally, he got tired of hiding. It was very stressful for him, and here he is being hidden by these people. To begin with, his plane's shot down, it's on fire. He has to bail out. He comes down in a foreign country, he has no idea where he is. Doesn't know what happened to his buddies on the crew. Can't communicate with U.S. military. He's being helped by total strangers, and at the beginning, they can't really communicate because they can't speak English. My dad can't speak French at that point,
Hmm.
and any one of these people might be a collaborator
A spy.
and
Yeah.
turn them over to the Germans. And there's several instances described in the book where my dad was almost discovered by the Gestapo. Finally, he got tired of hiding. Um, Word came that the Allies had landed in Normandy on D-Day, June 6th of 44. He decided to get back in the fight. So he wanted to join the French resistance. And his helpers tried to talk him out of it because they said it's way too dangerous. You could be killed fighting the Germans, or if they captured him, he'd be shot on the spot as a
Sure.
terrorist.
Hmm.
But he convinced him. So one of his helpers, Amy Cools, was her name. They rode bicycles across the Belgian border into France, and he hooked up with a unit of the French resistance. They were called the Maquis. They were made up of independent ragtag guerrilla groups located all over France. There were about 20 men in a group my dad joined, led by a French lieutenant who had escaped from a German prisoner of war camp. And their job was to harass the Germans. They would disrupt communication, sabotage railway lines, attack convoys, assassinate German officers. They got their instructions over from the British through coded messages over the BBC, and they were
Hmm.
supplied by the British through airdrops. And there's a number of instances described in the book of encounters that my dad's group had with Germans. And finally, 7 months after he bailed out, word came that there were U.S. troops in a nearby village of Trelone, France. This is September 2nd, 44, and he walked into the town, the little village there, when the town square went up to a army major, actually was an element of Patton's Third Army. He came up through France after D-Day and identified himself. They interrogated him, make sure he was who he said he was, and then he on a convoy heading to German prisoners to Paris, and then got a transport in Paris, then back to England, where he sent a Western telegram to my mother because she hadn't heard from him for over 7 months,
Yeah, she
saying
had
he
no
was
idea any of this is going on, right?
no. The plane went down on February 8th. Got a telegram from the War Department on February 23rd saying his plane was shot down and he and his crew were missing in action. And she didn't know anything, and it was really
Hmm.
tough on her because not only did she have Susan Ruth, who was 1 year old, but my other sister was born when my dad was missing in action. She had a 1 year old girl, an infant girl, not knowing if she'd ever see her husband again. But so that was a extremely happy day when she got that telegram saying my dad saying he was fit as a fiddle and to bank the money, honey, because he had all that back pay coming.
That's true. I did just a tad bit of research, and I've seen that there are about 10 movies about the Flying Fortress, one called Fortress, then another one called Red Tails, then Memphis Belle, then another one called Memphis Belle. The story of the plane. But there are a lot of movies about that. But this sounds like the making of a movie. I mean, Steve, has there been any talk about that?
Well, a lot of people who read the books tell me it should be made into a movie, and it certainly could be. Actually, it would be better as a mini series than a movie because it would be kind of hard to try to fit everything into a 2 hour movie.
Sure, sure.
If you're trying to cover, the German side of it with the pilots, not only my dad's story, but what happened to these other members of the crew and these Belgian helpers and members of the underground. So it would make a fantastic
Yes, it would.
miniseries.
This is the time, and you were talking about how some of those guys who got shot down made it all the way to southern Spain to Gibraltar in order to get back to England. I mean, that's a heck of a trek
Yes.
in occupied territory. I mean, that's a long way to go, no matter what. But that generation has always been called the greatest generation, and they're so much tougher than I'm the last part of the baby boomers, a whole lot more than us, and certainly not the ones that are coming up today. And it would just be inspiring, I think, for I don't know, for everybody to see and say there's so much more inside of us that could be tougher, and it could be a
Mhm.
whole lot worse than what we complain about.
Absolutely, without a doubt. We can talk a little more about that.
But I noticed there's video after video of Howard Snyder, your father, online. So there are some great things and resources people can look at, Steve, that can see your dad actually giving interviews.
Yes, on my website, which is stevesnyderauthor.com. Snyder spelled Snyder, stevesnyderauthor.com. There's a great deal of information, not only about the book, but about the air war over Europe itself. As you mentioned, there's an interview that my dad made in 2004 describing uh, what he went through. Also, my dad's flight engineer, Roy Holbert. There's a uh, interview with him, and there's actually interviews with quite a few World War II veterans on my website. Uh, there's just a ton of information about the air war. We have a lot of links to movies, to archival film, and different websites and resources. Yeah, I put a lot of effort
Well,
into making
apparently
this
you did,
website.
because you're a winner of 20 national book awards. I mean, and that's phenomenal. Yeah,
Yeah, well,
that's
thank you very
tremendous.
much.
20 national book awards.
Actually, it's closer to 30 now, but
Wow.
But who's counting, right?
So your book, Shot Down, is available at abebooks.com, Alibris, I believe, Thrift Books, Second Sale, and Target. And what other outlets can people pick it up, Steve?
Well, the vast majority of books, well over 50% of all books are purchased on Amazon. And the book's available both as a hardcover and paperback. And in the print books, the paperback and the hardcover, there's over 200 time period photographs. You can visualize everything you're reading about, all the people and
Tremendous.
places. And then it's also available in all ebook forms, Kindle or Nook or what have you, and then also available as an audio book.
Very
And then if
good.
someone wants a autographed, personally signed hardcover copy, they can get that on my website, on the homepage of my website. But most
Oh,
people get it
okay.
on Amazon.
Well, that's it for part one of our interview with Steve Snyder, the author of the book Shot Down, about his dad who got shot down in World War II in Belgium. It's absolutely fascinating. So tune in next week for part two, and we will see you then. And of course, as Red used to say, good night and may God bless.
Guests on the Afternoon Coffee podcast stay at the Real Rest Inns and Suites, the only 2-star hotel in the tri-state area with a don't ask, don't tell policy for snakes and other exotic pets.
This episode has been made possible by our awesome intro voice, Heather Foster. You can find out more about her at heatherfostervoice.com. All music has been provided and produced by Marble Planet Productions. You can hear more about them on Instagram at Marble Planet Productions. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can either email us at afternooncoffeepodcast@gmail.com or tweet us at afternoonjava.